Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Excited to have you here this evening. We are going to start in just a minute or two, but people will be filing in from the waiting room for a little bit here. So I want to make sure we get a chance for everyone to join. My name is Jim Furman. I'm the Executive Director of the Danielson Group. Excited to be presenting tonight with Michael Moody from Inside Advance and the Inside Education Group, and just really looking forward to sharing some of what we've been thinking and hearing recently with all of you. So thanks for joining. We have the opportunity to share some. We're going to have a large crowd, so we'll do questions tonight, both through the question box here in your panel. You should see over on the right-hand side, I think, an opportunity to submit questions that we'll be able to respond to. And we'll also save a good chunk of time towards the end of the webinar tonight to make sure that we get the chance to answer those. And also want to just kind of start as we're still letting people file into the room. You'll also notice there on the right, there's a section that says Handouts. And that gives you the opportunity to download the presentation in a PDF form so that you can have that, if you prefer, in front of you this evening. There's some other resources there, and we'll be sharing things throughout. And then we're going to start tonight as people continue to come in with a couple of poll questions, just to hear from you all, kind of get a sense of who's joining us tonight, and to share some other things that way. So we'll launch the poll here right now and then give it another minute before we dive into the content. Thanks, everyone. If you're just joining, there's a poll up on the screen just to get a sense of who's joining us tonight while we wait for others to continue to come in. Also, you'll see repeating some things if you were not with us right at the start. There are handouts on the in the control panel that you can download if you'd like to follow along with the presentation we'll be sharing today. Give it just about 30 more seconds to complete the poll, and then we'll see the results and truly get started. We're up to a good number of people, but the number's still going up. So please make sure you answer those questions, and we'll get started soon. There we go. So it seems here that the majority of folks who have joined tonight are in the virtual instruction mode, and or have at least been in that mode partially through a hybrid model or part of the time, and very few folks tonight who are back in the classroom full time. Not surprising given the content, but excited that we have the opportunity to talk about the framework tonight and to think about how the framework that many of you have used for years in the classroom, in what we used to know as a traditional setting, is now available as a support to you during this time as you are teaching virtually or in a hybrid model. So welcome to everyone. I really appreciate your time tonight, and I do hope that we will be able to share some information that's useful to you all as you're engaging in virtual instruction. And we'd just start by thanking you. I know it is not what you had planned for, certainly, and also something that you didn't anticipate. None of us did, and we appreciate the hard work that educators all over the country, all over the globe are doing right now to make sure that students are safe, are valued, and are getting quality instruction. So excited to be with you this evening. Again, my name's Jim Furman. I'm the executive director of the Danielson Group, and also tonight joined by Michael Moody from Insight Education, and he'll be sharing in just a minute and giving you all a chance to see some virtual coaching in action related to remote instruction. There we go. We're also on Twitter this evening, so if you like to do that, some usernames there that you can tweet in your comments, and would be excited to hear what you have to say that way. So please do join in online through social media as you get the inkling too. One of the things that we've been saying over the last months is that right now teachers need support, not scores. And so while we at the Danielson Group have a long history of working with schools and districts to support teacher evaluation, we have been very clear since many schools went to remote in March and April last year that we think this is really a time to focus in on formative assessment and support for teachers, and to do our best to provide what it is that they need during this time to improve instruction and to really support students in the classroom. And so while we believe that there is a great potential and great promise and great opportunities that can be had as it relates to evaluation, we really do think that we want to support schools and districts right now, and school leaders in particular, to support their teachers by giving feedback that allows them to continue to learn and grow within a context that they are still relatively new to. And we think also that this really gives us an opportunity to rethink and to reset on some of the things that we have done in evaluation over the past decade, some strong and some that need to be revised and changed. And so we think this is an opportunity as we go through this crisis together that we can really rethink what it is that we want to do to support teachers in the long term as well. Many of you I know on this webinar this evening have been working in systems that have policies and procedures related to evaluation. It's been your norm to conduct, if you're a school leader or a supervisor, to conduct informal and formal observations most likely. You might have been certified. You've probably calibrated using the framework for teaching or another tool in your district. As a teacher, you're probably used to getting those scores mid-year or end of year and feedback and those sorts of things. Those are the systems we were living in. And of course, now we have a lack of certainty, as we saw from the poll question at the very beginning. Some of you are remote, some are hybrid, some are in person, some will likely be something different next week. There's a lack of training, to be quite frank. So our teachers, though many districts and schools did an amazing job over the summer and early fall to start getting teachers ready to return to remote instruction, we know that this is not what most of us were prepared to do. And the same with coaches and supervisors. This is not the type of instruction that we're used to observing or providing feedback about. So it means that we need to really focus in. And in many cases, I know in states across the country, there's still somewhat of a lack of clarity about what the requirements are going to be for evaluation and what the guidelines are for conducting observations. And so we recognize that this is still a moment of uncertainty. We think, as I said, though, that there's an opportunity for us to use it to become and to be better and to create an evaluation system that is better, that's focused on teacher-driven inquiry and innovation, and that is focused on growth and the learning of teachers. For that reason, we're prioritizing several things in our work with schools and districts that you can see there on the screen. Again, if you joined a little bit later, the handouts are available in the panel, so you can also download a copy of this to follow along if you'd prefer. One of the things, though, that's most important there at the top is that, as is always the case, our educators and we as a profession collaboratively need to focus on what it means to teach well. To be on the same page with one another in our school buildings about what instructional excellence looks like. And that looks different now. And so it requires renewed conversation. It requires returning to some of the foundational principles that we believe in, but really thinking about together what it looks like in a Google Meet and how that's different than what it looks like in a classroom, for instance. And so that's one of the things we really want to provide support for, and we hope that we've been able to do. And I know lots of you are doing really interesting and amazing work in the districts and schools that we've been hearing from over the past few months. And I'll highlight also the bottom point there, which is that, as is always the case, but even more so now, we think there's real opportunity and an importance to be placed around reflection and collaboration. We need to give teachers the time and the space to do both of those things in order to really not only maintain their own well-being, but also to think about what it is that is best for students at this time. And as things are ever changing, it's even more important that we reflect as practitioners on what has happened and how we might be able to do better. So one of the things that we've done recently, and I imagine some of you might have been on our webinar a few weeks ago, is to put out a guide that really thinks about the framework for teaching and the way it's structured in relation to remote instruction. We've focused on fewer components. We really think that this is a time not to necessarily look at all 22 components or to think about all of domains 2 and 3 in conducting observations, but to highlight the things that are most important. And so in conversations with advisors, practitioners, and through our own work over the spring and summer, we focused in on a set of 8 components, and I'll share just quickly about that in a second. And one of the other important things to highlight is that this guide, and our advice right now, is that the rubrics that so many of you who use the framework know and are familiar with are still important. They remain important, but at this time we think they should be used primarily to ground and to guide conversations, not necessarily for evaluation. And when using the rubrics to observe, it's important that teams norm, as I was saying before, to really sit down together, to watch one another during virtual instruction, to record yourselves and one another, and to think back on what it is that you see that's happening that is excellent, and to use those as starting points for growth. And this really it requires us all to recalibrate, to rethink. And you know, I mentioned, and I know from my own experience, and many of you spent lots of time watching videos of teachers teaching and gathering evidence and aligning that evidence to a rubric and assigning a score, and did it in a very different context. So now it's important that we take the time and the effort to do that recalibration. So our guide is available, the link here, and you can download it from our Danielson Group website and from Insight's website as well. The framework has always been a common language. And so what we've tried to do is really to take those same components and many of the same elements you already know in most cases, or in many cases, and apply them to this context. So while there are some minor changes or shifts in language, for the most part, these are the same components, and we're just using them again now in a different context. Teachers can use this tool for reflection, for self-assessment, for collaboration, and we hope coaches and administrators will use it to observe and provide feedback and support to teachers. We've gotten a really great response, and we are excited about the use that the framework is already getting. We're really excited that Insight has been thinking about how to use this framework for remote teaching within the context of virtual coaching and video support for teachers, which many districts have been doing already, but even more are starting to do now in this context. So and I'm excited to pass over to Michael in just a minute so he can show you some of that work, and to think about how this tool that we are providing can really be used as a support, whether you're using the framework for teaching already or a different framework or no framework at all. It's a good opportunity to really think about a set of 8 components and how they can help inform your understanding of what excellence looks like right now and your support for teachers. So we've, as I said, taken 8 components from the framework for teaching and really narrowed in on 3 stages that we think are especially important right now at the launch of school. This is a living document, so we'll likely add additional stages and components, but we wanted to give the opportunity not only to put forward something that applies right now, but also something that can evolve, both for all of us collectively as a profession, but also locally for you. So starting with knowing and valuing students and how important that is at this time. and using that information to build responsive learning environments, be they online or hybrid or in person, and engaging students in learning within those environments. So the guide, as you look at it, will really dig into these three stages, provide alignment to the components of the framework, and also provide some strategies and suggestions for both synchronous and asynchronous instruction. I won't go too much into detail about the content in the guide, but this just gives you a brief sense of kind of some of what is there, and hope that if you haven't already, you'll have the opportunity to access that. And again, we're thinking about this a little differently than we have in the past with our rubric. And what we're going to be suggesting, and what Michael will show in just a minute, really focuses on where where teachers are in learning to teach it within this new context. And so we are recommending and working with some schools and districts to put forward this I hesitate to even say the word rubric, but this trajectory instead. There are some things that teachers are probably not doing yet. Not because they are an unsatisfactory or basic teacher, but because of the context we're in. There are some things that are in process that they're learning to do, and there are some things that are in place. And so we want to think about practice that way, and we want to align coaching supports to where teachers are along this continuum. So I'm going to pass over to Michael here. We've had the opportunity to collaborate in the past, and excited that, again, that Insight got excited about our remote teaching guide and is really doing great work to support teachers in using a lot of different tools and resources, but excited that there's an opportunity now to use this particular one.
Great, well, thank you. Jim, maybe while I'm getting over to my screen, one question came up. It said, what are you encouraging school districts to do regarding evaluation, since you're encouraging them not to use it for evaluation? So maybe you can address that briefly, why I do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we're doing related to the guide is we are recommending, which we haven't often done in the past, that in cases where evaluation still is occurring, that student or districts work with their local bargaining unit, with teachers, and collaboratively to narrow the focus of evaluation. So we're recommending these 8 components rather than the full set as one possibility of a way to do that. We're recommending, and we're talking in different situations about how to potentially pause the stakes of evaluation. So it might be the case that teachers receive observations and formative feedback, but not necessarily summative scores in the way that they would have in the past. And so there, these answers and solutions are going to look as different as our districts do across the country. And we're happy to kind of talk through and work with individual scenarios. But our recommendation is that this is a time to hopefully, in the best of circumstances, pause on the stakes of evaluation and reset what we've been doing with it to make it even stronger.
Great, thanks. Thanks for having us too. As Jim mentioned, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the question box. We're trying to sort through those. We'll have some Q&A time at the end, but also we'll try to address them in the meantime. But I'm going to jump in and talk a little bit about the work we've been doing, thinking about how do you take this framework now and really, there we go. Build it, sorry. Course as we go, I lose my feed, but we're going to just work with it. As we think about the real opportunity to start to coach relative to this work. So we think about this work in a few different ways. And I'm going to pause my screen one second just so I can get my screen back up and working. As we do that, there we go. Jim, can you talk a little bit too about just the 8 elements real quick while I pull my screen back up, kind of how the elements are situated within the components?
Yeah, and so for folks who actually are familiar with the framework, you might notice some changes to the elements too. So one of the things we've been doing is updating the whole framework, and this gave us an opportunity to put some of those new and refined and revised and updated elements into practice too. So we're excited about that. But for those who are less familiar with the structure, the components of the framework are further subdivided into elements, and those elements really help to define what excellent instruction looks like within a component of practice. So here in this tool, in the remote teaching guide, you'll see those components, and then you'll also see the elements that further delineate what each one looks like.
Perfect, thanks. Great, we're back too. So that's helpful. I want to share a few resources. We're going to chat these out so you can have access to the sites, but there have been two resources that have been particularly helpful as we think about coaching, particularly as we use technology and with video. Now, admittedly, we've been thinking about video for a few years, multiple years, in fact. And so our work with Harvard at Best Foot Forward and now a more recent project called Visibly Better really dug us into this idea of thinking about how might we leverage video more effectively to really support teachers. And this was pre-COVID, right? So this was as we were thinking about just building more effective support structures. Now we know it's become really critical in our work. And so I would encourage you to visit their site. There are tons of resources just for implementation, lots of good information about rubrics and products and other things that might be helpful as you think about this type of work. But Tom Kane, notably, is one of the lead researchers and folks at Harvard. And one of the things he said a few years ago has really stuck with me, which was this. As we were thinking about teacher support and coaching specifically, and we know there's a lot of research out there now that suggests that coaching is one of the most effective ways to support teachers, he said he didn't think coaching was effective without video. In fact, he didn't think it was even possible to move practice without video, which is a pretty bold statement at the time. We're starting to see it more in practice now, but I bring it up because what I want to show you then is how we're starting to leverage video, given that we're all living in a very video-based world like we are right now, and thinking about how you might bring this into practice, despite the fact that we're in the midst of a pandemic and we're all, in many cases, sitting at home trying to teach and kind of go through these options. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to how we're looking at the process. I'm going to show you a video, but I'm going to be showing it with you in our platform, ADVANCEfeedback. It's a video-based coaching and can be used for evaluation if you want to, feedback platform. And the idea was, could we bring this work and start to eliminate some of what I like to call administrivia? So the fact that we're taking notes in notebooks and trying to do so many things with technology, could we put it all in one place and really focus on what's most important, which is this feedback and the conversation that corresponds with that feedback? How do we really engage teachers, coaches, school leaders in really unpacking instruction and start to eliminate some of the hurdles that make that so hard to do in traditional school settings and now kind of virtually as well? So you're going to see that we think this coaching process should be kind of multifaceted, including things like self-reflection. Can we engage peers in giving feedback so it doesn't fall on the shoulders of a coach to be the one responsible for giving feedback to dozens of teachers, but really can we open up that door of coaching to help us all be coaches to each other? And then specifically, can we provide resources in real time so that as we're providing the feedback, we're also really supplementing it right away with resources or support so that teachers get what they need when they need it. You know, the platform also houses coaching, live coaching similar to this. We call it Advanced Live. And we're not going to be able to show that today, but I want to really kind of dig in and get into the platform. So I'm going to go ahead and just take us right into the platform right now. And there you go. And what I would like to do, I'm going to start an observation. So what we've done is we've asked a teacher to submit a video of herself teaching. And here we go. It's right here. I'm going to play it.
Okay. So let me share my screen and we'll go over your problem of the day.
Now I'm going to mute the video so I can talk over her. We're not going to watch the entire lesson, but what I want you to see kind of as we think about this is what we're trying to do now is take this framework for remote teaching, which has the components and the elements, and figure out how do we help? You know, if a teacher's not sitting in front of us or we're not in their classroom watching them teach, how can we start to provide the robust support that we think teachers need, particularly in this time? I was a teacher and a school leader, and I was the CAO in Washington, D.C., and never was I teaching virtually. And in fact, it was always very classroom based. And so despite the fact that, you know, we have very veteran and excellent teachers, this is new territory for a lot of us. And so when we think about even the mechanics of providing that feedback, things like technology have become critically important, especially video. So what you're looking at is a video of this teacher. She did a screen capture, essentially. So she just recorded her screen. Her students are all plugged in via Zoom. She's in a classroom, an empty classroom in her school building, which we're seeing a lot of school districts do, teachers teaching from the classroom, but no kids are present. And what you're not hearing is there are students' background, and you'll see when her picture flips off that the screen flips on. But a few things happened with this teacher as she was seeking feedback. The first thing we asked her to do was capture the video and provide us with some context. And so what you'll see here is one of the ways we've really started to emulate or kind of reconfigure the coaching process was really try to figure out how do we kind of bring all the pieces in one place and think about it like we would if we were sitting in a school building. And one of those is we typically sit with the teacher in front of the lesson and say, hey, what are you going to teach? What do you want me to look for as your coach? What's something you're focused on? And so what we're doing now is using technology to have this teacher in particular complete a pre-observation survey. So what she's done is she's uploaded the video. While the video was uploading, she was answering some questions. Describe your learning goals, any additional context. You can see right here, she gave us her lesson plan. And so here's her lesson plan. So I'm already getting a pretty decent sense of what this teacher's goals are for the lesson. I can see the lesson plan, which we have right here in front of me now. And I can also see the types of things she's looking for because she answered these survey questions. And so as I watched the video, the other thing she did was she self-reflected. And so you can see there's hashtags or timestamps along the bottom of this video. The darker peach ones are the teacher. The lighter yellow ones are my comments. But what you'll see here is as I play the video again, and again, we're going to mute it, there's commentary that runs down the right that shows all the feedback this teacher presented in the self-reflection aspect. Now, sometimes teachers just watch the video, self-reflect, and they try and tag it relative to the framework. And that's what we're doing here. So you can see there's a question about, did the teacher move too quickly to the whiteboard activity? I'm able to, in very real time, watch the video and respond to these teachers' feedback right here in the platform. But the other thing I can do is I can start to give feedback to this teacher. And what's noticeably important in this process is how do we connect the work that the teacher's doing to the components of the framework, and specifically those elements. If we think about what this teacher's focused on and what we want them to improve, how might we do that work? One of our big lessons has been, can we start to tag and timestamp these right away so that when we're using video, we're not lost in the mess of a video trying to find out where in that video this work is happening, but really can we leverage technology to do that well and do the work for us? And so I'm going to put in a test comment here just for the sake of this conversation. But what we're doing right away then is we're starting to tag the comments in the video. You can see the video pause because I'm giving feedback, and I can start to say these are the type of feedback I'm going to give this teacher. So you can see I have these drop downs on the right. I'm going to say this is a question I have for the teacher. Very importantly, we can start to tie my comments to the framework right away in the specific elements. You can see I just pulled up, these are the components and the elements of the framework for remote teaching that Jim just reviewed. And so we could say this would be about tasks and activities. And then I'm going to save this comment. So already what I'm starting to do is watch the instruction and give really specific feedback to the teacher in two ways. Number one, in response to her self-reflection and questions she posed to me as her coach, but also in my general observations. As I scroll down, what you see here, here's the test comment I just made, but here's all the commentary, both between myself, and these are my comments, and the teacher. So you can see the teacher's wonderings, and then I can almost immediately respond right there. I'm also able to tie these to the rubric right away. So we've numbered them. If you've downloaded the Danielson group document, you notice they're not numbered. All we did was take the components and numbered them because they were already the domains. They were already numbered. And then we numbered the elements. So it allows us to have some organizing structure. So if you're using this, that might be something you do if you want to load it into platforms such as ours or a different way of organizing it, that can help. But what you see here then is all the commentary that we've given to this teacher, that I've given to this teacher, specific to this framework. The other thing that it's allowed me to do is start to give feedback to this teacher so that when she goes back and kind of uses, she understands it. So I'm going to scroll down and we're going to highlight maybe one aspect of it. Opportunities for thinking and reflection. I'm going to click here. So you can see I've explained to this teacher, I've given feedback to the teacher. She's using a physical object. This is hard to do when we're using video. You're going to see how she does it right now. So I'm going to click play.
Not my screen, but on me. Do you see my boxes that I'm holding? Yes. So these boxes are a lot like the Venn diagram that we just drew.
So again, muted, but what you can see here, this teacher is really trying to do a few things. Number one, probably emulate some of the work she does when she's in person, right? Using manipulatives or something, a visual representation or objects. So in one regard, I wanted to give her feedback because she asked for it about the use of this. Kind of, is it working with the video? Does it emulate kind of what we're seeing on the whiteboard that she's also projecting? But But notably, what was interesting for me as I was watching this teacher teach is, one of the things we're seeing a lot of, is particularly as we're thinking about this coaching work, is sometimes what we do in our classrooms does not always translate immediately over to what we might do online. And so she's doing a lot of Q&A, and you'll see this if you were looking at my feedback, you would see that quite frequently. She'll pose a question, she'll wait for students to respond. As we think about the framework and the elements in the framework for remote teaching, one of these is about really kind of using your routines, but also you can see here instructional materials and resources. Or are we giving students opportunities for thinking and reflection? In my observation of her teaching, one of the things I noticed is it was very much call and response. And it would be, as what we see in a typical classroom, right? There are 1 or 2 students who are responding all the time. So my questions posed to her, do you think there's a method for encouraging more effective participation? Or might you utilize other activities so that students are engaged perhaps virtually with each other in some sort of collaborative work, maybe making the learning a little bit more flexible? What I've been doing is trying to leverage the framework and these elements within here to provide really specific feedback for this teacher, not in generalities, but when you use video, and I'm going to keep talking about the importance of video because we're such in the video world right now, this is kind of the best way to do it. But when we're using video, we have such a great opportunity to say, hey, I think it might have been more effective, or you did a really great job. Look at it, it's right here, let's watch it together. I've always believed that coaching is really about good question asking. I say always the best coaches are the best question askers. They know how to ask a good question. Coaching should be much less about us saying, I would have done it this way, you should do what I do, in my opinion, and much more about, let's think about this together, let's watch it together. The beauty of using video too is it's very infrequent or kind of rare that when we're coaching teachers, we have the opportunity to sit down and watch together. Typically, we've watched them teach, we've taken notes, probably in a notebook like this somewhere, and then we go back and debrief and we say, here's what I saw. There's a lot of power in seeing it together and asking questions together and unpacking it together. And so what the process is allowing us to do is really capture that feedback, timestamp it, make it really accessible to the teacher so I can push play or she can push play and just go ahead and watch it. When I go to the second step of the process, this is when we provide that specific feedback. And these typically look like the forms we're used to filling out when we're doing either observation for coaching or even for evaluation. We see this frequently. But what we've done is loaded the descriptors that Jim alluded to or talked about in terms of not yet, in progress, or in place right here. And so what we can do is start to give this teacher specific feedback relative to the elements and components of the rubric. And you can see if I expand it, here are components. So respect for students' intersecting identities, knowledge, current skill, whole child development. And any comments that I made relative to this and tagged them relative to this component, they show up here for me. So I'm not pouring through my notes anymore. The system is helping me think through and organize my thoughts already into the components and then the elements. All that I have to do is look at it and start to make those assessments. I can read my comments and I can comment for this teacher. I'm starting to give the teacher feedback in very real time and really specifically to the elements of the framework for remote teaching. We also know that some things aren't observable. When we think about classroom instruction, there are some elements specifically, I'm looking about respect for students' intersecting identities or understanding their current knowledge. Those aren't likely things we'll see in a video clip. And so one way we address those is with that pre-observation survey I showed you. Can we ask the teacher questions about how they introduced this? Maybe how they interacted with the students' families? What happened prior to this lesson? We can load all those questions in and ask teachers to give us responses to those in the reflection process. Again, helping us maybe assess how they're doing on some of the non-observable elements within the framework for remote teaching, but also really specifically just getting into the weeds and into the work. And we know we can't see everything in a classroom, so how might we glean different aspects of this teacher's work? We're also a little bit hamstrung, right? Because a lot of times we get it from sitting in a classroom. We're talking to the teacher, those informal things that happen when we're doing that. We're even more isolated these days because likely you're sitting, if you're a coach, you're sitting like I am at home, and the teacher is also sitting at home. So we don't even have the benefit of dropping by, talking in the lunchroom, all the things that really kind of, I think, made coaching even more effective, that relationship building, getting outside of the classroom and understanding that. So can we leverage some of our other structures in order to get into that? You can see here I'm also providing this teacher with some general feedback, strength areas, growth areas, things that we know matter. But importantly, and when I talked about attaching resources, the other potential we're starting to see here is because we're using video and because we're so frequently immersed in this kind of video world right now, there are actually lots of ways to provide resources and exemplars to teachers that are asynchronous, that we can do it here. So, we've built a resource library, and what you can see here is I've tagged my resources, and so I can filter by tags and I can see different things that I might want to recommend to this teacher. So I'm gonna check off this, here's a feedback strategy, and select those. And what's happening down below then is you can see I'm recommending resources to this teacher. What I would encourage you to think about, especially as we're working virtually, is you're going to start to see a lot of video of teacher practice, particularly if you're coaching in this way. We're going to see a lot of good examples of what works. One way we can start to connect teachers' practice to each other is by capturing that video and doing things like uploading it in this resource library. And so you can see what I've done here. If I click on this, it's going to take me to a video right here.
We'll try to do just like a half an hour meeting today.
That's another teacher doing another virtual instruction via Zoom, but he had a great way of introducing objectives to the students. And what you're not seeing in the video, because we don't have time, is he actually split his students into small groups and they collaborated around one piece of the objectives for their day. That's one way that we might help the teacher that I'm supporting right now see what it could look like in practice. One of my pieces of feedback to her was, how might you engage students differently so there's more collaboration going on, which is hard to do via video, and particularly in Zoom if you're not used to it. And we're not sitting in a classroom where I can just have students move their desks. He did a good job of that. So I taken short video clips and we start to upload in the resource library so that we can actually serve those up to teachers. So not only is the teacher I'm coaching getting feedback from me, but I'm providing her with some examples. I'm also, maybe giving her this learning doc, which might be a Word document. You can see here, teaching tactics that encourage active learning. So this is one that I can recommend to her right away as well. So as many resources as you want to upload, we can do that. And the point here is, because we're not in traditional context and we need to rethink coaching, there are ways to make this a much more comprehensive process without feeling like, we have a video somewhere and we're housing the feedback on my desktop and I'm emailing documents back and forth. Everything that's happening is contained in one place, which we think is a great benefit to the teacher and the coach, quite frankly. So I'm just going to the final step in the process, and what we have here is what the teacher sees when the feedback is done. She could go in here and she could, again, watch the video. She can see all my feedback that scrolls alongside the video, so I can see in real time what's going on in the video and the type of feedback that I, as the coach, had given her. You can see all the feedback I gave her down below, the general feedback, any resources that I provided to her. And I can also send her a PDF report. And so what it's allowing us to do is connect that process right away. We like to follow up these coaching conversations with a virtual meeting. We have Advanced Live, so we do it in our platform. It's basically Zoom, but it happens right here. We do it in the platform because we want to record it and attach it right away. But you can do it anywhere. You can do it kind of in the structures you're already using. The goal, though, would be, can we emulate this coaching process? Can we tie it to this framework for remote teaching in very real ways so that teachers see the practice in action? Virtual instruction is challenging, especially if we've never done it before, which many of us have not, including myself. And so the more we can provide examples while giving coaching at the same time, I think the more opportunity we're going to have to grow a teacher's practice in really effective ways. We have a window here to be as effective as possible. We're so worried about learning loss and all the things that have hamstrung our students for the last several months. We'd hate to see this opportunity kind of waste away, or see kids continue to kind of not get all the instruction they can because we don't have the right tools in place and we're not supporting teachers the way we need to be. Teachers now more than ever, coaches, administrators, we all need support, as much support as possible, given the current climate. And so, while we know we necessarily in the field shifted to figuring out how do we support kids, how do we get them online, how do we ensure the curriculum is in a way that can be delivered to them, hopefully virtually, if not we're seeing packets, we're seeing all kinds of things. But I think we necessarily forgot that we need to support teachers right away because we were so worried about just kind of riding the ship and making sure we could just have school. But now we're kind of in it for the long haul, and we don't know what the future holds necessarily. We know it's going to be a little bit bumpy. And so if we can think about ways to really build that effective support, I think it's just going to help us in the long run. The other thing I'll say, and I'm going to pause so we can show a few more things and ask some questions, is, we've been thinking about this prior to COVID. And so I want to kind of also articulate that I don't think this is just practice for kind of when we're virtual, and then when we go back to school, all things can stay the same. There's an opportunity here to really transform how we think about teacher support, how we connect teachers. We've seen a lot of value, had so many teachers talk to us about how much they're learning just from watching themselves teach, which is something we don't do very often, just from taking video and doing some self-reflection or sharing it with a peer. There's no reason that can't continue when we're all back in our classrooms, not wearing masks, and hopefully kind of back to normal as we're hearing that kind of vernacular over and over again. But there are ways that when we go back to that, we know the challenges. We don't get to see each other teach very well because we need a substitute. We need lesson plans, all the things that make even watching each other teach challenging. And so if you can leverage video in effective ways, and we can get the systems running now, there'll be systems that will be proved to be quite effective as you get back to school, kind of in the classroom, because the work will have already been done. We've already gotten over the hurdle of using video. By the way, we're using phones to capture video if they're doing something different or sitting in classrooms too. And so while I'm sharing a virtual instruction, if teachers are back in classrooms where you're at too, using the app, putting up the video and capturing it, uploading it right to the platform, it all happens pretty seamlessly as there. I want to show you real quick too, one of the other potential values in using technology, but also how we start to think about using the framework for remote teaching as a way to drive professional learning. What you're looking at are what we call the growth reports. The black line represents the average scores, kind of as I was thinking about teachers relative to not yet, in progress, or in place. I was scoring them on that kind of 3-point scale. The black line represents the average of all the teachers I'm coaching, but you can see each colored dots are different teachers. What this is showing me is, what does performance look like for my teachers? If are they struggling, where are they struggling? We can see a few dips in the averages. So might that be an area that we want to focus our professional learning on in the future? This real-time data becomes really helpful because we're not sitting in schools anymore. We're not kind of walking in around, kind of getting that informal data gathering that we do as administrators or coaches when we're sitting in a classroom. And so the data becomes important because it helps us drive some of our own growth around what are we doing with teachers? How are we helping coaches really coach most effectively? And so I don't want to lose this. If there are ways for you to start to collect data in the process, it becomes quite helpful. When I was CAO in Washington, D.C., one of the things I always struggled with was I knew coaching was going on, but I knew coaching was going on in a classroom between a coach and a teacher. I didn't have a lot of data to suggest, was it effective? Which coaches were more effective than others? How might we be more effective in our professional growth? And so the data really kind of unlocks some of those really important strategies as we think about the work and next steps. The other thing that I would suggest too is, as we're thinking about this, we're also using video to really norm and calibrate observers. And Jim talked about norming and calibration as one of those key exercises. Given that remote instruction and virtual instruction is new for us all too, we make some big assumptions that all coaches or administrators know what to look for, know what good instruction looks like, and that's just not always the case. It's always shades of gray when it comes to quality of instruction. So thinking about how you're engaging observers, the way we're doing it is we use the same platform to calibrate our observers. And so we take videos of instruction like this, we just share them with groups of observers, and we have them watch and score and norm relative to the elements within the framework for remote teaching. What it allows us to do is see, are we all on the same page? And the other thing it does is it shows everybody, teachers, that it's not just about teachers growing their own practice, but coaches and school leaders also have opportunities to grow our practice, get better about looking at instruction, really get more normed. Are we seeing the same thing when we watch the same piece of instruction? So I would really encourage you to think about how might you norm, as we saw in that slide, relative to this work. Maybe even before you're supporting teachers, are we sure we're looking for the same things? And so leveraging video in a very similar process, just to bring those who are doing observations together to say, let's watch this and look at it relative to this framework and say, hey, do we see evidence of this? If so, where did you see it? Because I didn't see it. Those conversations can all happen virtually as well within this work. So I'm going to pause and open it up to Q&A. If there are any questions about thinking about how might you stand up these programs within your school or district, or really thinking about use of video specifically for coaching relative to the framework, that can be, everything's up for grabs. So I'm going to pause for a second. Jim, I don't know too if you want to pop in if you have anything else to add in that.
Oh, I was going to start throwing questions your way that I've been seeing.
Here we go. Here's one that says, I noticed the software is being used for video coaching, include all domains components. Can it be formatted to include only 8 components are recommended? Absolutely. I mean, our platform, it's context specific. So there aren't generic frameworks thrown in here. We put in your framework. And so, you know, we use the Danielson Framework, the whole one, and also the framework for remote instruction. They're both loaded in here. You can use any framework you want in our platform anyways.
Lots of questions about the library and especially the videos that you were showing as resources that are available, like where those are coming from and how I think that people are craving more.
Pictures are a little different.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to. I started the video and she started talking over us. We source videos from within the context that we're using them in. So within a specific school district, those coaches are sourcing videos. The video you're watching now are our partner districts. And so we had a few great teachers who said, I'd be happy if you use this, just give me some feedback. And this is one of our teachers. She's in South Carolina, in fact. And so as our coaches are coaching teachers in the platform, we're sourcing our own videos. So we're going to this teacher and saying, hey, we really liked how you did this. Do you mind if we use that video? And then we just take the video. We typically trim them. You know, one thing we're learning we have a lot of lessons learned. Number one is we haven't found that like hour-long instructional videos are the most effective way to coach a teacher. We typically think 20 to 30 minutes is the sweet spot because it's long to watch, but it's also a lot to give feedback on. So the other thing we're doing is when we put videos in the platform as a resource, we typically tailor those to like, I would say 3 to 10 minutes. So teachers don't feel like they have to watch, you know, we don't recommend, here's 3 lessons, 3 hours of viewing, but we want to get specific nuggets, and we typically tie them, when it comes to the framework for remote teaching, we're tied them specifically to the elements. So if we know a teacher is struggling with, say, I'm going to look at one of the elements right now. Student autonomy and responsibility, right? There's not a lot of responsibility happening to students. In this video, I tagged that. One of the ways she's doing that is students can change their work, take a picture, and email to her. I thought that was a great strategy because I've heard some other teachers saying, I don't know how to follow the work of my students. So if you can find good clips and we can tag them, then in our resource library, you just sort by tag. You could tag them by the element and you could see the video clips that are specific to the element, and you could recommend those. But I would say, you know, as you're thinking about resources for teachers to view, think in short clips. Think in like really small incremental practices. I like to call it formative feedback, right? So I think of summative as the big evaluation, right? We think about it all year, but at the end of the year, you get this big score. There's lots of work that could be happening in between those. I call them formative observations. Like, let's think about the 2 things you're going to work on, and next week do 1. So if you're going to work on transitions, just film your transition, upload it, and give it to the coach. The coach can then give you feedback on that really small clip. If it's great, we'll put it in the resource library and share it up as well. So there are ways to do that, but we're sourcing them both in public domain, which there are a lot of videos available in public domain. I'm guessing some people on this call have access to things like teaching channels or some of the other video players. You can link those in here. So sometimes it won't be an actual video, but it'll be a link to a different platform. But anywhere you can get your hands on videos, I think that's helpful. But we, quite frankly, found the most effective videos to come from the teachers themselves. So as long as they're willing to let us use it, we just put it in here and use it. Other questions, here's one. How do you get past association's fear of using video in this process? Concerns about bargaining and video being used punitively. I totally get this. I understand that we do it 2 ways. Number one, you know, like the fear of video is far less now than even was last January for all the obvious reasons. We're all on video all day long. So I think we're seeing that those fears allay a little bit. One thing we do too is in advanced feedback, teachers own their videos. They can upload 55 videos if they wanted into the platform. Nobody can see those unless the teacher specifically shares it with the coach. And that's a formal process. So they upload it, they pick who they share, and then they share it. I'll maybe pull it up while we talk just so we can start to think about it. But teachers fully control all of their own videos. And so one way we just control for that, feeling punitive or feeling like big brothers, we just don't let people view them who aren't entitled to view them. We're giving teachers in our platform, we give teachers a lot of control. We think that's important. We want them to start to take ownership of their professional learning, but we also don't want teachers to feel like this is punitive. Another way we do it is we get clear about coaching versus evaluation. You know, as I said, we can house both coaching and evaluation in our platform, but what you can see here is this is clearly coaching. This purple bar says it. If this were evaluation, the bar turns to orange. And the teacher notes it if they want to use video for evaluation. We're not seeing a ton of video used for evaluation, if I'm being honest. We're starting to see more now, given that we have to kind of figure this out. And so we do anticipate this year seeing more of that. But you know, teachers really have control of their videos, so they don't feel like that's punitive. I think that answers that question. Go ahead.
Yeah, another question that came up earlier had to do with our continuum of not yet and in process and in progress. And I think especially when you show the data graph, which can be so useful, the question comes up, well, you know, what are our districts just going to take those three things and turn them into scores for a teacher and use them for evaluation in the same way they would have before? And that's a question we're getting a lot. So I think there is some fear around this developmental continuum being used as a score. And what we're attempting to do is to really shift mindsets around that. And so when we're putting forward these descriptions in the remote teaching guide, we actually start with performance that is proficient, that is good. And so what's described there is good performance. This, unlike the rubric, the framework rubric that many people are used to, there is no unsatisfactory level described. Of course, we know that there is unsatisfactory performance happening sometimes on occasion, and that's something to deal with, but we're really focused on what it is that good instruction looks like. And while we ourselves as the organization or Charlotte as the author of the framework can't often control what districts do with the tool, it is our recommendation that those markers of not yet, in process, and in place not be treated as scores. In fact, those are all stages at which any teacher during this time should find themselves on any given day in different areas of instruction. So there's no way that well, I shouldn't say no, but it's highly unlikely that there are teachers who aren't not yet on anything. Not yet is a growth mindset. It's what we would look for with students. It's what we should be looking for with teachers. So we want to be able to say not that this is unsatisfactory that you are not yet. This is the reality of the situation that you are not yet. And that is not an evaluation of you as a teacher, but as the practice that's happening right now. And so the goal is to say, well, not yet in relation to what? What does that look like? How do we get there? And so where there are, in cases where districts are requiring evaluation or states are requiring evaluation and the rubric is still going to be used, we know, and our recommendation in that case would be that the rubrics with the 4 levels of performance that many already use be the determining factor rather than the 3 levels on this continuum. Though we're really hoping that districts will take this again as an opportunity to shift the conversation and to say that what's important here isn't that this was unsatisfactory or absent from your instruction. That's not the case. What's important is that this is an opportunity for you to learn something, to grow, and to have more impact for your students.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, the only other thing I would add to this too is one of the ways we're trying to allay fears of this growth versus gotcha, which is a phrase we use a lot, is not starting necessarily with, maybe even not starting with the school administrator or the person who is officially giving the scores, for example. And so that's why we promote a lot of self-reflection. Can teachers just self-reflect? Can they share a video with a peer? So they just collaborate, or grade level colleagues. Can we build PLCs amongst teachers? We believe that coaching is only going to be effective if we dismantle this idea that a coaching interaction is between a coach and a teacher, a one-to-one relationship. And really, we broaden this definition of coaching to be all of us. There's a lot of value in me watching another teacher teach and us giving each other feedback. I'm learning by giving feedback, but I'm also going to get feedback from that teacher. But what we found is if you can start to build more robust processes, it starts to feel less punitive because we see the well-roundedness of the process versus, if it's only going to be an administrator in and out, either via video or in a classroom, it starts to feel more like it's evaluative because it's tied so tightly together. And we're relying on the same person to give all the same type of feedback. Some cases, if you're in a small school, for example, sometimes that's the only option, right? There's no coach. It's just the administrator. That was my case. I was the administrator, but I was also the coach. And so, I had to get really explicit about what I was using for evaluation. Formal versus informal, all the things that are kind of pretty common nomenclature these days with evaluation processes. I had one question too here. what would you do if you worked in a district that doesn't allow videotaping? We still use the platform. We use Advanced Live, and the way we do it is we just have the teacher broadcast essentially, and I watch. So if you're using Zoom, you could just invite it to the meeting. We just do it all virtually. We just don't videotape the session. So we don't have the teacher capture their screen and video, but I'm present and I'm still using the platform. I'm still taking notes. I can still actually timestamp. The only in this platform, the only thing that's different is the video falls out and there's a clock. And so the observation is still happening. I'm still watching the teacher teach. I'm still timestamping. I can still tag instruction relative to the framework, but we're just not capturing it via video. So I think, part of this is just work rules, and these things, in my opinion, are always made or broken by the policies that surround them, right? So we got to be very thoughtful in thinking about how we roll these types of things out and how we're supporting teachers. I think what's helpful is, as Jim mentioned, a lot of states have relaxed the kind of evaluation guidelines in the spring, and I know there's still a lot of question marks about what's going to happen this year. But right now, specifically, we don't hear about a lot of evaluation going on. We're just starting school. This typically would be the time we're just kind of ramping up. So if you can build these systems now and kind of get support in the hands of teachers now, we found that the more teachers feel supported, the less worried they are about kind of evaluation versus growth, because they just need support. And so if they're getting support, they'll feel more effective at their teaching.
One question you answered earlier about in the system, how many components or elements you can include and how that can be adjusted. But a related question came up about, where to focus. And as you look at it in that big drop down where they're all there populated right now, there are quite a few. Our recommendation really is that you start where you are. And so by looking at the remote teaching guide, it may be the case, given how long you've been in school or the teachers that you have and what they've been doing, you might already feel that lots of things are in process or in place with the first stages of the remote teaching guide, or you may not. But we do think, even though there are 8 here, if you're starting at the beginning, start with the first 2. Like, really do focus in squarely on knowing and valuing students and how important that is. We think that's essential right now. Within any given component, you might focus on one element, you might focus on them all. And it really does depend on the context and what you're seeing in teachers. As Michael was sharing that graph again, I was thinking about how important it is just right now to do a kind of walkthrough and stock take of your school at this moment. Not evaluative, not even focused on the feedback right now, but really focused on trying to understand, if you're an administrator or a coach, where are we? Where do we need to start? What do we need to focus on? That may be in some way elements from each of those 8 components. It might just be 2 elements from 2 components. And so that's really gonna vary and be based on your context and what teachers are experiencing right now.
Yeah. The only thing I'd add is this is kind of our work now. So you shouldn't hesitate to reach out to the Danielson Group or our team at Insight Advance. This is the work we're really supporting districts and doing at this moment. So we're learning a lot of lessons in real time and very quickly. So feel free to reach out if you have questions. I know we're running short on time, and time is valuable, so we don't want to keep people over. But our contact info is all over the place. If you click on any of the links that we've provided, you can get to us. Reach out with questions. I'd be happy to engage and helping think through what those systems look like. It's going to look different in different places, and so we want that, and that's important. I think context really matters a lot, and so don't hesitate to reach out. We'd be happy to help in some of these conversations.
Absolutely, and you guys are doing a Twitter chat next week that we're going to participate in as one way to continue the conversation. Want to put forward that we at the Danielson Group are offering a lot of workshops this fall online for teachers and coaches and school leaders. And we're trying our best to be responsive to what we're hearing, our specific needs from the field. So would welcome you to check that out. And we're doing a special offer right now. And then join the Twitter chat next week if that's something you enjoy doing. We'd love to have you.
We had 900 people, over 900 people on this webinar, so there's no way we can get to all the questions that were posed, but I don't want you to feel like we don't care. So keep those questions coming. Feel free to shoot us an email. You have our Twitter handles, or the websites are all available, so you can, so you feel free to chat us that way too, but we'd be happy to help.
Yeah. Awesome.
Right about time. Any final questions or anything that's helpful? Closing thoughts, Jim?
No, I think, I mean, one of the things I would just, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of the things I would say is that we're continuing to learn. Like, we are all learning in this process, and we are all starting over lots of times. And so we are excited that we're learning from all of you, and we'll continue to do so. Also, just a quick reminder, if you were here, you'll get a video recording via email tomorrow. And again, those handouts are available right here, right now. And you can visit our website or email us if you're interested in talking about some of those support, getting more specific questions about what evaluation might look like for you in the context. Happy to have those conversations and engage.
And a recording of this will be coming tomorrow. So look for your emails. You can watch it again if you want. We'd like to thank everyone for being here, though. This is really exciting work. We know it's challenging work. So, on behalf of kind of our teams, thank you for doing the work you're doing. Kids really need as much support as they can get right now. I know it's challenging times. We're kind of a 4-year-old running around the background as well. So there's a lot going on and a lot to occupy our minds, but we know kind of we got to stay focused and really do the right work. And so if we can be helpful, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.